Thank you, Mr. Hood. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair. So can I thank Mr. Speaker through yourself for giving me the chance to raise this matter before the House. It's a subject I raised in the last Parliament through an early day motion before the 2010 elections, so under a Labour government. But sadly, many of the concerns that I raised at the time have not receded. Can I welcome the Minister to her place? I don't believe it's necessary, Mr. Hood, to go into any great lengthy exposition as to the importance of books or of reading. I think we can take for granted the Minister's agreement that encouragement to read books is a good thing, and that any government of whatever political colour will wish to promote the reading and enjoyment of books. Let me first of all declare an interest at the start in that I am an avid reader, and in the last 4 years I've become an avid reader of eBooks, downloaded to my Kindle or my iPad, but can I state on the record, that's to my personal iPad mini that I bought myself, not my publicly funded iPad, lest the tiresome usual suspects see an opportunity to berate me for misuse of public funds. My personal experience seems to be fairly similar to other ebook readers. Purchasing an e-reader prompts the reader to buy more books than he or she did before. An additional benefit of e-readers, incidentally, is that I can now purchase books and store them unread in my Kindle, instead of buying physical books and leaving them unread on my shelf gathering dust. Amazon state that UK users of the Kindle buy up to 4 times as many books as they did before they bought their Kindle. For those of us feeling the dreadful physical onslaught of the years, e-readers make print more accessible with adjustable font size and colour, and so encourage reading in that way. And e-books offer greater consumer choice. I was delighted to discover, Mr. Hood, that books by my favourite science fiction writer, the late, great Bob Shaw, which were previously out of print and unavailable, are again available online to download. And that renewed availability of previously out-of-print books from a huge range of authors has provided a much-needed revenue stream for publishers and authors, as well as offering readers greater choice. E-books are a British success story and have helped drive the recovery of the UK publishing industry since the financial crisis of 2008. Already the biggest e-commerce spenders in the world, consumers in the UK have been the fastest in the EU to embrace e-books, partly because of the huge choice of English language books, partly because of competition and choice in e-book readers, and in large part because of the price competitiveness of e-books. This has brought big new opportunities to readers, writers and to publishers. Rapid year-on-year growth saw e-book sales in 2013 account for 21% of the value of the UK's total book market, and that's up from 8% in 2011. The Publishers Association reported that 29%, or about £1.5 billion, of UK publishing revenues in 2013 were derived from digital products. Amazon.co.uk Kindle ebooks already outsell print books. And this is all good news, Mr. Hood, but the Minister will be aware that a change is coming, a change that will have damaging consequences for all concerned, all except the Treasury, that is. But for everyone else, for authors, for readers, for publishers, for online retailers, the consequences of changes to be introduced in January, just 6 months from now, will reverse much of the good that the introduction of e-books has accomplished in recent years. Unlike printed books, which quite rightly attract a zero rate of VAT, e-books have the full rate of VAT added onto the price. That in itself, I believe, is simply wrong, and that's a position I've held for a number of years. It is clearly unfair to recategorise a book as an electronic service, which is the justification for adding VAT, simply because it's downloaded rather than picked off a shelf. A book is a book is a book. At the moment, the full UK rate of VAT is charged on any e-book sold in the UK. That doesn't affect those readers who buy a book from the Kindle store, because at the moment I pay the VAT rate as it applies in Luxembourg, where Amazon are based. From the 1st of January 2015, however, VAT will apply wherever the purchaser lives, which means, for example, that Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch, which I would highly recommend to the Minister, although a drawback of e-books is that it's much harder to lend other people your copy, which I purchased from Amazon a couple of weeks ago for £3.49, which included a nominal VAT rate of, I think, about 3%. If we add an additional 20% to that cost, which is what I would have to pay had I waited until next year to buy it, it will undoubtedly have the effect of discouraging many readers, not all, but many readers from buying it. The decision to buy a book is a price-sensitive one. Ofcom research shows that willingness to pay for a single book download declines steadily as the proposed price of a book download increases. The average price respondents were willing to pay, the average price respondents were willing to pay was £3.74. About 42% of people were willing to buy an ebook at £5 once VAT at 20% was added, bringing the cost up to £6. Then the proportion of consumers willing to buy it fell dramatically to 28%. According to the Publishers Association, digital sales across all publishing increased in 2013 by 305%, and digital revenues are now worth $509 million out of an overall book market of $3.4 billion, or 15%. In fiction, ebooks now account for a third of all sales, that's £200 million, and are 7% of non-fiction sales. But the association adds, these figures are likely to continue to increase, but at a slower rate of growth than in the earlier years of e-reading take-up as the market matures. A further check on the growth of ebooks will come from the fact that they currently attract VAT in the UK at the full rate of 20%. That's compared with the application of the zero rate of VAT on physical books, a long-standing feature of the UK's tax regime, and is a reflection of the belief that the tax should not act as a disincentive to reading and learning. However, this important feature of the fiscal regime is absent for digital publications on which the full rate of VAT of 20% is applied. Research suggests that consumers are discouraged from buying ebooks by the VAT rate. And the association continues, the European Commission Directorate General for Taxation is conducting a full study of the whole of the VAT regime and has identified ebooks as a particular focus of attention. We currently await a communication from the Commission outlining its findings and recommendations. However, publication of this seems to be suffering from repeated delays. We believe that the UK Government should urge the European Commission to publish its findings following its study, and that the Commission should resolve to allow Member States to investigate applying lower rates of VAT on e-publications, books and academic journals. The UK should itself then undertake a similarly detailed study to analyse the impact of reducing the VAT rate on e-publications with a view to reducing to the zero rate. Mr Hood, ebooks are a hugely important part of the UK publishing industry, which is itself a hugely important part of our creative industries. And in a week when the government are pledging to help and support our creative industries, this debate has come at an appropriate time. The UK is the largest ebook market in Europe, but the Society of Authors is concerned that publishers' practices and the government's current policies are creating barriers to growth and hindering development of the publishing industry. It told me this week, and I quote, "The largest barrier to growth for most authors is the difficulty of obtaining a proper return for their professional work. Authors' incomes continue to be squeezed, fewer books are published and sold, advances and royalties have fallen, while more unpaid work is expected of authors in marketing and publicising their work, including appearances and use of social media. Print books attract, continue the quote, print books attract a zero rate of VAT, but their electronic equivalents attract a rate of 20% in the UK. Other EU countries, such as France and Luxembourg, have unilaterally reduced the rate of VAT on ebooks. This means the UK will now be at a competitive disadvantage, as ebooks sold in the UK will be more expensive than those sold elsewhere. The result is often to drive down prices, leading to a smaller net sum going to authors. Most of the major players in ebook markets are based abroad. Given the rapid pace of development in the ebook market, there's an urgent need for removing VAT on ebooks to avoid the UK slipping behind European competitors." And that's the end of that quote. There are those in the industry, Mr Hood, who welcome the change from charging VAT in the country where the ebook is sold to charging the consumer where he lives. As someone who has spoken in the Commons against Amazon and others for not living up to their moral obligations to pay tax, it's a change that I understand. However, this is not about Amazon or Kobo or any of the other ebook sellers avoiding tax. VAT on ebooks is not paid by the seller, it is paid by us, the consumers. And if this change goes ahead in January, while the Treasury sticks to its position of insisting that an ebook is not a book at all,
but the equivalent of a video game, and is therefore subject to 20% VAT, then the whole industry, and not just those specifically involved in producing and selling ebooks, will suffer, and they will suffer significantly. The government argues that its legal advice, quotes, indicates there is no scope to change the VAT treatment of the sale of digital book products under EU law. I simply cannot accept this, because Luxembourg and France have already challenged this. They've cut their rates for ebooks to 3% and 5.5% respectively in 2012. There is no reason the UK cannot follow suit. I certainly don't believe that ministers in this government of all governments are reluctant to pick a fight with the EU Commission. Other European governments have taken on the EU on this issue. Germany, Poland and Italy are all calling for reductions in the rate of VAT on ebooks. Will the UK add its voice to that call, even assuming that it stands by its legal advice that has been previously published and publicised? Will they at least add their voice to the calls on the European Commission for a change? Incidentally, the German coalition government's executive board decided in April to cut VAT on audiobooks to 7% from its previous 19%. The German Ministry of Culture is also pushing at the EU level for the same 7% VAT rate to apply to ebooks in line with the rate for print books in Germany. So the decision, if made, would make ebooks and print books equal as far as VAT is concerned. A German government spokesman said, due to rapidly advancing digitisation, we insist, I don't know what German for digitisation is, by the way, but I'd be quite interested to find out. We insist on a rapid implementation of the agreed points. We want to make sure that print and electronic media and audio media are treated equally for tax. Well, hooray for the Germans, Mr. Hood. In this House, we're all only too aware of the need to nurture the next generation. As parents, we understand the importance of encouraging our children to read. My own children often borrow my Kindle to take to bed, although they have not yet mastered the art of charging the damn thing after they've used it. That's maybe further down the line. So for a whole new generation who view CDs as quaint, old-fashioned way of buying music, who watch TV shows when it suits them, not when it suits the broadcasters, who download their video games rather than queuing outside a shop, who have a far greater number of distractions than any previous generation to prevent them from sitting down with a book, but who will, when choosing to read a book anyway, be more likely to buy electronically. Are we really saying that increasing the cost of that product by up to 20% can possibly be reconciled with an ambition to encourage the young to read literature? Does the government still accept that we should promote reading and literacy and do all in our power to widen reading and literacy? And of course, I know that the answer, the genuine answer from the Minister will be yes. But should we not therefore widen our support for print books to their digital equivalent? Is the government willing to engage with the European Commission to hasten the completion of its impact study assessment into options to reform EU VAT rules, including those affecting VAT on ebooks? Shouldn't the government be standing up to Europe, following the examples of France, Germany and Luxembourg, by insisting on a substantially lower rate of VAT on ebooks? This is one area where I would actually like to see a race to the bottom. I want the government parties and my own party competing in the next few months leading up to the general election to see who can offer the lowest rate of VAT on ebooks, because it is consumers, readers and authors, not politicians, who would emerge as the winners. And lastly and importantly, Mr. Hood, one activity I do use my taxpayer-funded iPad for is reading newspapers, and I'm a subscriber to the digital edition of the Times. I am delighted that as revenue from journalism is increasingly scarce, newspapers have found a route to survive in the 21st century through digital subscriptions. But their route to survival is similarly under threat. This country removed taxation from newsprint more than 300 years ago, removing what was seen rightly as a tax on free speech. Now, however, the Treasury is stealthily reimposing it by requiring the 20% VAT levy for the proportion of every newspaper subscription that is digital. It's not this government that introduced that, it's the previous government. This government has merely continued it, and it is wrong. As a former local newspaper journalist, I want to see a successful future for our local as well as our national press.
when quality journalism by properly trained and professional staff is competing with numerous free sources, as well as so-called citizen journalists, well-meaning amateurs with dubious qualification to write about their chosen field of interest, imposing an unnecessary 20% charge on newspapers is a serious blow to the freedom of expression. That argument was first deployed successfully 300 years ago. It is no less relevant today. The Minister and her colleagues have an opportunity to be on the side of fairness, literacy, opportunity and culture. The question today, Mr Hood, is will her Treasury colleagues allow the Minister to grasp that opportunity?
Minister Andrea Leadsom.
Thank you, Mr Hood. It's a pleasure to be speaking under your chairmanship today, and I'd like to start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Glasgow South on securing the debate on this very important subject. I'm aware that he's asked a number of questions recently on this very issue, and as he will be aware from the answers he's received, I'm actually filling in for the Exchequer Secretary here in Westminster Hall today, as he's in the main chamber leading on the Finance Bill. But I will do my best in his absence to answer some of the Honourable Gentleman's questions. So, of course, nobody needs to be an expert on tax to recognise the importance of books. The Honourable Member is absolutely right. Not only is publishing as an industry in which the United Kingdom can boast to have always been and to remain one of the world's leaders, be that because of Charles Dickens or Jane Austen or Agatha Christie. In fact, I understand Barbara Cartland is one of our most lucrative book exports, but I'm not personally so familiar with her novels. I'm delighted to give way.
I suppose at this point we really should acknowledge that one of our own colleagues on her side of the House, the member from Mid Bedfordshire, is consistently in the top 6 on the Amazon bestsellers list on the eBooks.
Well, I'm sure she'll be delighted to be name-checked, and her sales will no doubt rise dramatically as a result of that very helpful intervention. But certainly the government also recognises the crucial role that reading can play in increasing literacy amongst our younger generations, which is so important to their future success. I certainly remember with my 2 sons, who were 5 and 3 at the time the first J.K. Rowling books came out about Harry Potter, and we literally used to snuggle up together, and none of us wanted them to go to bed because we just wanted to get on to the next bit. So there's no doubt that some of the great British children and adults literature, and I'd include C.S. Lewis and some of the other great children's authors amongst those who've really helped to support and sustain literature and pleasure in reading amongst young people and adults. And our new national curriculum, which comes into force this September, is very clear that all pupils must be encouraged to read widely, both for pleasure and for information. So we absolutely recognise the important role that books have always played in this country and will continue to play. On the issue of the tax itself, I'd like to begin by reassuring the Honourable Member that this government does recognise the importance of the e-services market in the UK, and secondly that ministers are taking a number of actions to support the digital economy. E-services are a growing part of our economy, and we do expect them to generate significant tax revenues going forward. On the specific issue of VAT, I should briefly explain that this is an area, as the Honourable Gentleman pointed out himself, that is governed by EU law, and that reliefs from VAT are strictly limited under EU law. So, as honourable members may know, when the UK joined the European Community in 1973, we successfully negotiated to keep our existing zero rate on items such as children's clothing, most food, physical books, newspapers and journals. This is a derogation which most other member states do not benefit from. Yes, certainly will.
I apologise for interrupting, but when the derogation was granted on our accession to the EU in 73, there was no reference to physical books, because e-books didn't exist at the time. There was a concession on books. And as that derogation stands, that could be extended to e-books, since e-books come under the definition of being e-book.
Yes. I accept the Honourable Gentleman's intervention, and I will come on to that very point if you'll bear with me. So EU VAT law does allow member states to implement reduced rates of VAT of no less than 5% for certain goods and services listed in Annex 3 of the VAT Directive at the discretion of member states. One of these reliefs is the supply of books on all physical means of support, newspapers and periodicals, other than material wholly or predominantly devoted to advertising. But while on the face of it this may sound like it includes e-books, Article 98 inverted commas 2 of the VAT Directive specifically excludes electronically supplied services from the reduced rates in Annex 3. This means that the UK charges the standard rate of VAT at 20% to e-books and the zero rate of VAT on physical books. Now, as honourable members will be aware, the UK's e-books market is a growing one, and as such, it is not clear that it is in need of a stimulus in the form of a reduced VAT rate. Between 2011 and 2012, e-book sales in the UK increased from £138 million to £261 million. So at a time when the government is working to tackle the economy's problems head-on and deliver a recovery that works for all, it's not clear that we should be offering fiscal support for such a rapidly expanding industry. I will give way.
For giving way, but in her account of current e-books, how many of those are currently subject to UK rates of VAT and how many are not? Are subject to, for example, Luxembourg rates?
Well, the Honourable Lady will forgive me, I don't have those specific breakdowns to hand, but I'll happily write to her on that point, so my apologies for that, and I'll certainly give way again.
I'm grateful, man. It's just shown a great amount of patience, and I appreciate it. What she's just said, though, I think rather misses the point of my debate. No one is asking the government to offer subsidies or favours to the e-book industry. What I am asking is that an impending charge which currently consumers in this country are not paying should not be levied. We're not asking for the price. She is right that the industry is doing well and it's growing, but the problem is that from the 1st of January, people who buy books currently and paying 3 or 5% VAT will then from January being 20%.
Yeah.
So we're not asking for any kind of subsidy from the government. What we're asking is for the current situation to continue.
Yeah, and again, I understand entirely the point of the Honourable Gentleman's debate here, but the issue is that specifically e-books are not counted as zero rateable books from the point of view of the EU directive. So it is not the case that this is an optional charge to VAT. It is the case that the EU directive requires us to treat e-books for the reason that they are treated as an electronic service, because as the Honourable Gentleman said in the start of his remarks, you can change the font, you can download them, you can switch from page to page without having to move pieces of paper and so on. So they are deemed to be an electronic service, not the same as a physical book. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's not an option as to whether we charge VAT or not on those books. And coming on very specifically to the case of France and Luxembourg, which he's made very clearly, and particularly this very difficult issue of books on Amazon, which I'm sure he would recognise, whilst he would support not paying VAT on e-books, at the same time he recognises that there has been an issue with big companies locating themselves in other places to take advantage of beneficial tax regimes that no doubt do help their sales. But as he has pointed out, since 2011, France and Luxembourg have levied a reduced rate of VAT of 7% and 3% respectively to bring them in line with their VAT rates on physical books. And this is creating competitive distortions to economic operators in other member states. And there has been pressure from the industry for the UK to reduce its VAT rate on e-books. The EU Commission has begun European Court of Justice infraction proceedings against France and Luxembourg and has formally instructed them to apply their standard VAT rates to supplies of e-books. So if the UK were to reduce the rate on e-books, it is extremely likely that we too would be infracted. I'd be interested to know if the honourable gentleman thinks that that infraction proceedings from the European Court of Justice is something that we should seek to avoid in the UK, or whether we should embrace it. We could be unusually opposite sides of an argument on this point. I'll happily give way.
Well, I seem to remember being very complimentary of the Honourable Lady when she spoke very powerfully in favour of votes for prisoners in a debate on which we did take the opposite point of view, and we're going to be the same again. I am more than relaxed about the UK being the target of court action by whichever European institution is relevant. I certainly was relaxed about it on votes for prisoners, and we have to keep our position on that. I see no difference, frankly. If it's good for the UK industry, then we should be standing up for the UK industry against interference by the EU.
Well, I absolutely respect the honourable gentleman's position on this, and that it is the case that were we to unilaterally decide to change the VAT rates, then we would no doubt be subject to infraction from the ECJ. So further, the other very real issue is that by reducing the rate of VAT on e-books, it would be likely to create borderline issues in the wider electronic services market, because problems of definition could lead to a widening of the relief through legal challenge and industry changes. And this would put serious amounts of revenue at risk in the UK market, which is worth over £2.5 billion. So let me turn to the VAT changes that will be introduced in 2015. Currently, supplies of services, including electronically delivered services such as e-books, are taxed in the member state where the supplier is based at that member state's VAT rate. This means that member states with lower VAT rates have a competitive advantage, which encourages suppliers to locate there and sell to EU consumers, including the UK, at lower VAT rates. So from the 1st of January, therefore, there will be a place of supply change, which will mean that e-books and other e-services will be taxed in the member state where the customer belongs at that member state's VAT rate. And that is designed to make competition fairer and to remove the distortions. Now, legal advice obtained by the government indicates there is no scope to change the VAT treatment of the sale of digital book and similar products under EU law. The Commission's position is clear on the VAT rate of e-books. E-services attract a standard rate of VAT as they are electronically supplied services. The UK's rate is in line with EU law, and there is currently no intention to reduce the rate of VAT for e-books. So I'm sorry to disappoint the honourable member in my reply, but I hope he will be pleased to know that although ministers are focused on actions outside of the VAT system to support the digital economy, and in that area, outside of VAT, we are making great efforts to try and encourage the digital economy. So, for example, in June 2013, the government launched an information economy strategy, which includes positioning the UK strongly in the fields of e-commerce. And it aims to do this by, amongst other things, improving digital skills across the population and by creating the infrastructure to support innovation and growth. So whilst the Honourable Member for Glasgow South will, I'm sure, be disappointed with my answer on VAT and e-books, I hope he and other Honourable Members will be reassured that the government does support the sector, that we will continue to support the sector, and that we are confident that the electronic services market will continue to grow and to generate significant tax revenues going forward. Thank you.